Hello and welcome to Niv Review. So this was going to be a fun little thing I do where I'm going to look at Niv-Mizzet decks that have been put online or other people have done and do little fun ranking system. I haven't fully figured it out. I'll just quickly explain how this came into be. This is a Niv-Mizzet list I found on eBay that someone was selling their whole deck for. Now they were selling it for a certain price that we'll discuss later on. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about what we'll do here. So I have laid out a full out of 5 different categories for the deck. And at the end, we'll grade the deck out of a total of 30 potential points. So let's talk about the first thing here, which is the curve of this deck. Now this deck on here currently is the split deck, so we're going to pull over to the deck of me uploading it online. And I will tell you straight up, the curve of this deck is the inverse M. So it goes up a huge amount of 2 and a little bit of 2 drops, sorry, a huge amount of 3 drops, couple 4s, lots of 5s, way too many 5s in my opinion, then curves out with a few other smaller ones. Now, is that a problem? Yes and no. So there's a lot of heavier, expensive spells which are also there because they have the basic land cycling text, but can also be finishers, so that kind of counteracts it. But all in all, there's a lot of fat at the higher end of the curve that could definitely trim down. So we're going to say that the curve of this deck gets a 3 out of 5. It's not horrendous. It's not the best. It's not one of these decks where you'll be waiting to do something till you get to turn 4, but it's definitely could be worked with. Now let's talk about spread of the guilds. So I did a full breakdown on the guild colors that they have in this deck, and they have in total, I believe, 43 non-guild cards, including their lands. 45, sorry, including 2 white cards. Every other card is a 2-colored card, which is already good, and they have a good split where the least supported guilds are 4s and the highest is 6. So good solid spread. I gave that a 5 out of 5. Good spread across all the guilds, guaranteed to get at least a couple of hits with your Niv-Mizzet. Always fun to say. Now let's do the full breakdown of their deck. So they're running 38 lands in total. There is a few budget options here, obviously Ash Barrens, Evolving Wilds, 4 of each basic, which is good to have it covered, Terramorphic Expanse, Path of Ancestry, and then a bunch of the Vivid and Thriving lands to do mana fixing. Now, I've only solitaire tested this deck at the moment. I'm going to record some matches with it for fun for another part of the video. But all in all, it's a solid, basic deck, and there are plenty of ways to fix. As we said before, there are some additional land cycling cards, but in all, they have 11 fixing / ramping cards. They have the Safewright Quest, one of my personal favourites, and then a few mana rocks here, which are low budget. If you were brewing this deck, they could definitely be worked on. Tome of the Guild package is a nice inclusion, a way to constantly draw cards. Very expensive mana rock, but that draw ability in this deck is really good because pretty much every spell will trigger it. They're running the full playset of the Borderpost. For those who don't know, they are 2-colored mana rocks that you can cheat out into play if you bounce a basic land back to your hand. So it's not technically ramp. It keeps your land count low for some things. But if you have 3 mana, you can just play them out. They come into play tapped, but the positive side is they are hittable off a Niv-Mizzet. They're not great for color fixing though, because if you can tap for the mana to make these, you've already got those colors. Again, you'll have to cheat it in and hope you have a basic land, which can be a little awkward, but still pretty good. We have 4 cards here which are for the purpose of flickering our creatures. We have a good spread of value creatures, but you also know that our commander is insane value if we can blink it. So like that, we have a bit of ramp / fixing here in our 2-colored cards. I just put them off in a suggestion on their own. Then we have a split of good value cards. Now they're only running 21 creatures in the main deck, but as you can see here, there's some good ETBs. There's card draw advantage, clone, reanimation, rebuy effects, draw, clone effects again, Chronarch, rebuy spells, protection with Loxodon Hierarch where you can regenerate your creatures. Mercurial Chemist, this is one of the ones I would immediately cut. It's too expensive for what it does, but it's a nice, interesting inclusion. Coiling Oracle always has my love and opinion. Gloomshrieker, another rebuy effect, and Limvala, another protection effect. So, a good spread of interesting creatures for blinking, protecting, and using. Again, a lot of this comes down to you could trim the fat, you could get rid of this, you could replace the Chronarch with the free drop. Is it one from Blood Elemental, or whatever it's called, that returns stuff? Then we've got 9 interactive spells and removal. So we have Exile Artifacts effects. We have a single board wipe in the deck. Well, technically we have 2. We have 1 hard board wipe. We have Other End, which is a classic inclusion and a precon level. Then we have Selective Removal, a single counter spell, but it can counter up to 2, which is quite interesting. Mortify, Decisive Denial. Okay, so we have more soft counters, I should say. Then we have Rip Apart, always a good inclusion, and another soft counter / loose / deal damage. Then we have our value spells. We have Bring to Light, must have in every Niv deck, love it. Escape to the Wilds, good card draw selection. Extract from Darkness is one of my old favourites. I used to play in a lot of my Niv decks. 5 mana reanimate anything from the graveyard used to be the peak of the crop. However, I still feel it may be changed. Lawhole Command, solid command that can get you a hasty finish if you've got things done. Upside's Aid, it's an expensive rebuy, but still pretty good. Notion Rain is a good loot and draw, damage yourself. Now let's talk about the main stars of this deck and the one reason why I wanted to do this. This deck was running split cards, which instantly gets A+ from me, but my bias apart. These are probably the 5 split cards I would say you should draw in every Niv-Mizzet deck you want to build. Maybe not Turn and Burn, although it is pretty solid removal, maybe. But I would say these 5 split cards should be in pretty much every Niv deck you want to build. Discovery Dispersal is a good early game / good bounce spell. It also doesn't target, so it can get around a lot of protection. Flower Flourish is like a nice finish pump spell or an early game fixing spell. It only gets basics, so remember. Find Finality is our softboard wipe, -4/-4 will deal with a lot of smaller decks. But also we could just use 2 mana to get 2 creatures back if they've been killed or we've lost them. Then we have Road to Ruin, which is a ramp spell / removal spell with Aftermath. Again, solid cards. And Turn and Burn, which is a good way to just nuke something that needs to be gotten rid of. With that said, we put this in the wrong one. This should be in the value spells. Whoops, my bad. We also have, read the past. So, the finishers they've put in this deck. So, we have a Treacherous Terrain, which can do a lot of damage to decks that have gone potentially hugely ramped. Rave Upheaval, which lets put any creature onto the battlefield under our control. It gains haste. That creature doesn't die at the end of turn, so if we can get something truly busted, like an Eldrazi Titan or crazy things like that, we can use that. Phylath is a good token maker / pump ups effect. Unfortunately, this isn't the alchemy one that we have on Arena, where we can give trample, so it's a bit harder to finish with. But this is definitely way more supported in these decks where we have 20 basic lands, so it's definitely worth running. General Furious Rokiric. This should be your second card in every deck. Before you even put lands in a Niv-Mizzet deck, put General Furious Rokiric in. That's how much I believe in the General. Assemble the Legion they've put in as a finisher. I used to love this card, but I think it's just slowed down too much. But for a good pre-con card, it's still interesting. It's probably one that would be cut for something else. Kolaghan the Storm's Fury, dashy, hasty dragon that can pump Niv-Mizzet if it's on the board. Well, actually, him and Niv together is a +2/+0 to all our creatures. And his dash ability can make him harder to remove from sorcery boards with wipes. Spellbound Dragon is an interesting inclusion I didn't know was in the exist, but it's an interesting way. This is probably a card that would be cut if you lower the curve, because obviously it needs to discard huge threats. Knight of New Alara, absolutely amazing card. So, +1/+1 for each color you control, turns the Niv-Mizzet into an 11/11, which is, translation, you are dead in 2 turns. We then have another way to deal non-basic lands damage to an opponent with an Earth as well. And then finally we have Tithe Drinker, which I'm 90% sure is just a place filler in the deck. Now, I have no idea why you'd have it, maybe for Extort, but not the greatest. All in all, pretty decent deck. I gave it a 3 out of 5 for the breakdown. There was some good spells in there, a lot of trap, a lot of cards I would trim, but a lot of good spells either way. Let's talk about the cost. So, if you look at this deck on Cody, from through basic, it is $23 to build, or 2.3 tickets. So total instant 5. Nothing is expensive here. Everything is good, and it's a solid base. Now let's talk about the purpose. So this is a double-edged sword. If this was a valued precon, like if Wizards of the Coast announced that this was one of the intro deck things, and they put this deck out there, you know, the $20 decks, personally, I think it would be awesome. It would be a great way to get more people playing 5-color decks. It would work great for Niv. So that would give this an automatic 5. However, this is where this video came into being. This deck on eBay is trying to be sold for $60 before postage and packaging. So, for the purpose of this deck, 1, because no one should pay $60 for this deck. If you're going to make this deck, make it yourself. And finally, we'll talk about the fun. Now, just testing it out, looking at the spells, it's a solid base. It works great for an intro to playing Niv-Mizzet. I would highly recommend taking this list and using it. Now, the other purpose for fun, and this is another side of my personal search for fun, is the upgradability of a deck. Now, one example I would give is if you, for example, bought the Bloomburrow Precon and bought a couple of cards from Bloomburrow that you wanted, your deck's done. There's nowhere to go with that. Unless you want to get more competitive, blah, blah, blah. This, I think, works perfectly as a, hey, these are the things you should play in a Niv deck, but we've put in the more expensive, less powerful ones. You can replace them over time with better effects and cheaper costed cards. So all in all, I would give that a 3 out of 5. It is pretty fun. It will get stomped in higher levels, but I think it could hold itself with most little precon decks. So yeah, I would give this a 3 out of 5 for fun. So all in all, Niv to eBay scored 20 out of 30, ranking it at a B. Hope you enjoyed this breakdown. We'll do more in the future. See you later.